Through Millennials and Data, she bridges the data preparing millennials to enter a data-driven global environment. In her day job, she's the Vice President of Training and Data Visualization at Levelitics. And the fun fact about her is that she always wanted to be in the women's NBA while growing up. Everyone, please welcome Chantli Chicken.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to present today on design secrets for a non-designer. It's a topic that I've been presenting on for the past few years, but over the past few years, I've actually tweaked it and hopefully enhanced it and made it better and better to where I presented it last year at TC19 at the Tableau conference and got some really great feedback from it. So definitely excited to bring it to you all today as well. So a little bit about myself. Sagar hit most of it, all of it really. I'm Shefali Jagannath. I'm the VP of Training and Data Visualization at Lovelytics, a consulting service company and product company based out of Arlington, Virginia. I'm also the CEO and founder of Millennials and Data, which is a nonprofit organization that I started to bridge the data literacy and analytical skills gap, mostly among millennials, but we do offer trainings for professionals as well. And last year, I was nominated as a 2019 Zen Master, so super excited to have that title as well. Most importantly, I would say that I am not a designer, right? So I'm going to walk you all through this presentation and tell you why I don't think I'm a designer and how, if you feel as though you're not a designer, hopefully you can have some takeaways on ways that you can start to incorporate design into your respective visualizations and dashboards that you start to create. So why am I not a designer? Here's my non-designer journey. My non-designer journey started at Howard University about 9 or 10 years ago, where my professor provided us with a data set and said, just simply make sense of it. But at this point in my college journey, I had only used Excel, and the file that they gave us was larger than 1 million records. So I couldn't open it up in Excel, and I hadn't done the assignment yet, and it was due in a couple of hours. You know, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was due at 8 o'clock, and I just didn't do this assignment. And I simply Googled free tools, free of course because I was a student and I couldn't afford any type of software. So free software to analyze large data. And I ran into Tableau, and here's the first visualization that I was able to create in Tableau just after watching one YouTube video at about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And this is actually the visualization that I went and presented to class the following morning. And as you can see here, I didn't even take off the sheet 4 title at the top of my worksheet. So today, here are the visualizations that I'm able to create. And throughout this journey, there are just small things that I started to incorporate on a consistent basis within my visualizations that really took it from things like you see here to the visualization that you see on the right. And today, I still do not consider myself a designer. So what are those secrets, those things that I consistently do in my visualizations that hopefully you all can start to think about or incorporate into your visualizations if you're not a designer as well? So here are my 5 design secrets. The first, gathering requirements. The second, I'm going to show you all how to create templates. The third, we'll get into using icons and art to your advantage. Next, we're going to talk about choosing colors that matter. And last, I'm going to start to uncomplicate fonts for you all. All right, so let's talk about gathering requirements. So gathering requirements. For my requirement guidelines, the first thing that I believe that you all should start to do whenever you're faced with a new dashboard or a new project or anything that requires a visualization is to understand the goal of the project. What's the user's main intention in wanting to see this visualization? Next, you want to determine your audience's analytical maturity. So if you are a Tableau developer and you're creating a visualization, say for an executive, 9 times out of 10, they may not even know Tableau. So you want to make sure that you are understanding your audience's analytical maturity so that you're creating visualizations and you're using those interactions based off of how well your audience may know data, how well they may know Tableau as well. Next, you want to start to think about your end users' preferences. So are there particular colors or logos that they're familiar with that they want to incorporate in these visualizations? Do they want to size the dashboard a particular way? Are are there any other images that they want to add as well? So start to think about that when you're gathering your requirements from your users. Most people are thinking about just the data points that their users want to see, and then at the end is when they start to think about those preferences, and sometimes that can lead to a lot of rework. So you want to start to think about those preferences early on so that once you start that first draft, you already know some colors and how to size your dashboard accordingly. Next, you want to refine and prioritize the business questions. Based off of the list that your end user has provided you, do they want to see every single one of those points in the dashboard? If so, what order do they want to see those in, right? So what's the most important thing to them? What's the least important thing? And you want to think about that because that's pretty much how you want to lay out your dashboard, with the most important information at the top and the least important at the bottom. Next, you want to complete a high-level discovery of the data. So in terms of, creating your visualization, especially if you're just scoping out a project, you want to make sure that you have the data that is needed in order to execute on the priorities, on the requirements that your end user has provided you. So you want to make sure that you do a high-level discovery of the data so that if your end user is asking you to show them the sales per region, that their data has sales in it and has region information, and that their data just doesn't have profit by region. Next, you want to determine the views that are going to be needed to answer the question. So in terms of this, what are some chart types that you're going to need in order to answer their questions that they're looking for? So if they're looking at, once again, region and sales, do they want to see that as a bar chart? Do they want to see that as like a tree map? What type of visualization or view should start to accompany these requirements? So in order to bring all of that together and organize, the requirements that I just listed, I've created a dashboard requirement document that if you stay to the end, I'll show you all where you can download this for free from. I've created this dashboard requirement document to start to organize all the requirements that are provided by your end user. It goes into information about the dashboard itself on the left-hand side here, and then on the right-hand side is where you can start to build out more information and detailed information about the view itself. And when I speak about views, I'm talking about like a worksheet, one chart, one single view within Tableau. So let's walk through this requirements document. So step one is to provide the name of the dashboard along with the overall goal and the call to action and the estimated time of completion. So here, section number 1 on the dashboard requirements is just to list out the dashboard name, the goal, and when they would like to see it done. Step 2 is to understand the audience. So understand your end user and their analytical maturity. If it's for an executive, then you want to make sure that you aren't really adding in too much interactivity because, like I said earlier, they may or may not know Tableau and they may or may not know how to interact with that dashboard. It's okay to have more than one audience selected, but you want to make sure that they're kind of close to each other. So you can't create a dashboard that's both for an executive and an analyst because most times an analyst is more adept with the tool and they understand the ins and outs of the data and the software itself versus an executive who may not. So you want to think about when you're selecting more than one audience that they're kind of close to each other. So you can do executive and management, or you can do like management and analyst. Next, you want to look at the display mode. So how do they want to display this dashboard? Is it for a laptop, a tablet, or a mobile device? And are there specific devices that they're looking to display this on? And this is really going to help you start to size out your dashboard because there have been plenty of times where I've created a visualization and I had to resize it at the end. And, sometimes resizing is not always the best, especially if you've created like a floating dashboard and whatnot. Next, you want to go into determining how your end user intends to use this. So do they want to display this on the web, on a Tableau Online, a Tableau server environment, or a Tableau public environment? Are they intending to print this out in a PDF? Or are they wanting to export it to a PowerPoint or just look at it as an image? And this is also important because you can start to think about like how you're going to maybe scroll or lay out your dashboard. So if it's on the web, you could possibly have a scrolling dashboard versus if it's on a PDF, you want to make sure that you're sizing it so that it could possibly fit the size of a PDF. Versus if it's a PowerPoint, you may want to size your dashboard a little bit longer horizontally left to right so that it can fit within a PowerPoint slide better. And then when you're thinking about images, you kind of just want to make sure that you're not having too much interactivity because with an image is static. So understand how your end user intends to use the dashboard. And here, of course, you can select more than one as well. And then last but not least, on the dashboard section of this, start to determine any additional information. So are there filters, colors, or logos that they're looking for? Are there dashboard filters in particular? So if we're looking at region and sales and maybe states and sales, is there like a year filter that they want to see for this entire dashboard? Start to list that out and make sure that your users provide that to you as well. Even examples of other dashboards that they may have seen on the web, they could provide those links here so that you can have an idea of something that they've seen that you may be able to incorporate within your visualization. Alrighty, so then in terms of the view, so when I mentioned earlier, view is pretty much a single chart, like one chart that you're creating. So in this instance, if you are looking at the region by sales, that is one view. And then if you look at the region by profit, that is another view. So for the view itself, you want to provide the name of it as well as a high-level description. So you would say like region by sales, and then this is looking at the sum of sales for all of the regions. Next, we want to get into the data fields that are going to be used in this view. What are the primary dimensions that we're going to need in order to create this view? What are the primary measures, as well as any additional dimensions and any additional measures? Here, I wouldn't list out the filters in particular, because if you're just filtering by year, then you're not necessarily going to use year within your view. You're just using year as a filter. So within the data field section, I would just list out any primary or secondary fields that are going to be used. Next, for any of those fields that are going to be used, are there calculations that are associated with them? So for sum of sales, is that already aggregated? Do I need to aggregate it? Maybe it's not called sales within our client's database, and we have to, figure out the correct calculation to get sales or profit, things like that. So within the notes and calculations section, you want to provide any information on how to calculate particular fields. Then you want to talk about formatting. So how does your end user intend to see this chart? Is there anything that they want to color? Do they want to color like the top 10 categories, or do they want to color like the top 2 regions? Here's where you'll detail out any formatting just for this one view. Next, you'll list out the filters. So what do I need to filter this data by? So is it just 2018? Is it 2018 and 2019? So within the filter section, you want to list out any categorical date or measure filters, numerical filters that should be applied to this visualization. Now, you want to list out the data source. So where can I get this data from? What's the information that I need, the credentials that I need? And then last but not least, are there any additional notes that you should worry about, or you want to make sure that you incorporate for your user in just this view in particular? So do they want to see this as a bar chart? Do they want to see this as a types table? I would definitely put that information within the additional notes section. So to show you all that in action, here's a use case, a sample use case to incorporate this information into the 2 documents that I just showed you all. The use case here is that the VP of Sales wants to keep track of sales generated within the organization. Overall, he or she wants to know which region brings in and which segment generates the most revenue for each region. Currently, this information is provided in an Excel workbook and shows sales per category, sales per segment, monthly sales, and the number of sales. So here's what that dashboard looks like. It's a very manual dashboard that this VP is now looking to transition into Tableau. So the goal of this new dashboard is to create an interactive dashboard that analyzes the company's sales data that can be shared with the regional leads as well as the VP of the sales team. And for this dashboard, we want to know which subcategories have the highest sales, what are the sales per region over time, what are the sales profit and profit ratio for each region, what are the sales per state, and segment and region, which segment and region have the highest sales. So if we were to take all of that information that I just provided you all and place it within the document, here's what it would look like. The goal of this project at the top is to create an interactive dashboard. So everything that I just mentioned on the previous 2 slides will be listed here in the goals section. The name of the dashboard will be Superstore Scorecard, and the estimated time frame for it will be 3 weeks. Then when we get into the audience, the executive made sure that he or she stated that she wants to view it, as well as the regional lead. So in terms of your audience, this is your executive as well as the management who will focus on this dashboard. So we selected them for our audience type. Next, in terms of the display mode, this is going to be just on a laptop, and I've gotten really specific with the size of the dashboard. So the dashboard should not exceed 1100 by 1000. Then we're talking about how this dashboard will be viewed. So the executive will most likely view it on the web, or if there was a PDF, there could be a PDF that he or she could potentially want to print it out to and share it with their regional leads as well. And so for here, the use for it will be both the web and the PDF. And then last but not least, the VP wants to filter the dashboard by the order date, year, the ship mode, the product name. So we've listed those dashboard filters out in the bottom section. And then we've also provided the company colors as well as a link to the sample dashboard that this VP has viewed on Tableau Public that they like and may want to tailor their new dashboard to. So if I talk about one of the views, so there were a lot of questions that were asked. So I'm going to dive into one specific view, and that one view is the metrics details per region. So this chart itself is going to focus on the customers, orders, sales, profit, and profit ratio for each region. And that was listed out in the goals section. So I've listed the description as well as the view name up top. Then if we think about the data that's going to be used, here are your primary fields as well as your primary dimensions as well as your primary measures. So we're going to look at region, we're going to look at customers, orders, sales, profit, and profit ratio. In terms of calculating any of those, I've detailed out how to calculate the number of customers. So customers is going to be account distinct of customer ID. Orders is going to be a count distinctive order ID, and profit ratio is going to be a profit divided by sales. So that is listed out in the notes and calculations section. Next, no additional formatting or filtering is needed just to produce this view. And we've provided information on how to access the data source for it. So this just sample, we know this is the sample Superstore data set, but just for example purposes, we're going to say that this data source is a Google Cloud SQL connection, and the username and password were provided via email. And then in terms of additional text, the VP has specified that he or she wants to see this as a text table. So now when I do this type of worksheet for each of the views that were listed out, each of the questions that were listed, we're going to have about 5 additional worksheets that we need in order to answer all of those questions. And when you bring it all together, you're going to have your dashboard page as well as all of your view information, and that's going to leave you with 7 different sheets. So now you have your dashboard requirements, and you can start to build out this information. That leads me to creating a template. So you've had your requirements, and now before you start your dashboard, I always recommend creating a template. So once you've analyzed your data and you determine the insight that you would like to convey to your audience, create a grid-like template to help organize your thoughts. So for the template requirements, the first thing you want to do is you want to take all of those requirements that we had earlier, and you want to prioritize them and make sure you're only using what's important. So if I take those requirements, here I'm listing them out in order from 1 through 6 based off of the VP's needs. So overall, she wants to see the number of customers, and then she wants to see the monthly sales per region, then the metric details per region, the region segment details, the sales per state, and then the sales per subcategory. So we took all those requirements that were listed out, and then we prioritized them from highest to lowest. Next, for your template, you want to create your template using blank text boxes or pen or paper. I typically actually use both, so I'll start out by wireframing something with a pencil and paper on a simple white sheet of paper, and then I'll transfer that over to Tableau using simple blank text boxes with black borders around them. So here I've used a blank text box within Tableau to lay out a dashboard. So I basically just took a blank object, placed it on the dashboard, and then went to the layout pane and placed a black border around it. And I've gotten a little specific with exactly how I wanted to lay out this dashboard. Next, you want to make sure that you're designing to a grid. And this is one of the points that is talked about heavily within the big book of dashboards. So within the dashboard that I built out, the template that I built out, I have a 5-chart grid. So as you can see here, I'm laying out all of my information at the bottom, and my sales per state and my subcategory per state is snapping. Do you see this line right here? It's snapping to a grid. So here's what I consider a 5-chart grid, template. Here are examples of a 4-chart grid. So you have chart 1, chart 2, chart 3, and chart 4, with chart 1 being your most important chart. Here's a 3-chart grid. You have your most important chart on the left-hand side, and then you have chart 2 and chart 3 on the right-hand side. Next, you want to start to incorporate bands and add context. So I love bands. They are big, angry numbers. It's also another point that's talked about within the Big Book of Dashboards. So while you're building out your template, you want to think about ways that you can incorporate bands and provide that higher level summary for your end user. So typically when you're creating these dashboards, a lot of people just get right into the details and forget that some people don't even know what the higher level is. So if I created a dashboard that just looked at, you know, the region, the sales for each of the regions, and the entire dashboard just reflected the region, and an executive comes in and they want to see, all right, what is the overall sales for the entire company? You know, this region dashboard wouldn't give me that because everything is broken out by region. So an easy way to fix that would just be to simply add a band and add some context at the top. So here at the templates, I've added and incorporated a band at the top of the dashboard. So typically, a band, as I mentioned, is one of the highest levels, you know, of information that you can provide. So you either want to lay this out at the top of your dashboard or on the left. You never want to lay it, here's the left side of band. You never want to lay it at the bottom or the right-hand side because users read top to bottom, left to right. So here's examples of things that you do not want to do. Don't want to lay it out on the right. You don't want to lay it out at the bottom. Next, with your template, you want to use size and position to show hierarchy. So if we go back to each of those points that I indicated, so the 6 different priorities, the 6 different requirements, and we prioritize them based off of importance, I've placed each of those sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, based off of priority. So you want to lay your dashboard out based off of the user's priority. You also want to incorporate your filters. I typically incorporate my filters at the top. And the reason that I do that is because it limits the number of filters that you can have on a dashboard. So if you have your filters on the right-hand side and you have a scrolling dashboard, you can have about 15 to 20 different filters. And we know that with using Tableau, sometimes filters can hinder performance of your dashboard, especially if you have a lot of them. So I typically place my filters at the top of the dashboard so that it limits the number of filters that a user intends to incorporate within their dashboard. So here, you don't want to see too many filters at the top because it's going to take up space before you get into the details. And then last but not least, you want to begin to think about icons and the use of colors within your dashboard. So here I've placed the logo at the top right-hand corner of the dashboard, and I've also incorporated icons for each one of the bands, and I've made sure that they had labels associated with them as well. But what you do not want to do is you don't want to overcomplicate it. So I've only placed icons for each of the bands. You didn't see me place icons for each of the filters as well. So you don't want to overcomplicate thinking about using icons while you're building out your template. And I'm going to go more into how to place icons in your dashboard as well. All right, so once you have your template built, you want to fill in your template. So here, I've taken this template on the left-hand side, and I've created the visualization on the right-hand side. So I filled it in with each of the chart types, each of the bands, as well as each of the icons and the logo that you see in the top right-hand corner. So reuse your template, right? Here are examples of ways that I reuse my template. So I first created the viz on the left-hand side a couple of years ago, and then a few years later, I pretty much reused that exact same template to create the visualization on the right. So different information, same type of layout. There's another example. I've taken the dashboard that you see on the left, and then I reproduced the same layout using the information that you see on the right. And here's another example. So we have rider data on the left-hand side for Chicago, and on the right-hand side, we're looking at similar information except for the UK. So layout, fill in, reuse. Next, you want to use art to your advantage, right? So let's talk about how do we start to incorporate art into our visualization so that we can add a pop of flair to our dashboard. So using simple images and icons can really take your dashboard from basic to visually appealing. And here are some guidelines for those. One, you want to start to communicate icons, so incorporate icons that are easy to recognize and communicate meaning. So if we look at the three icons that I have here, I have a home, information icon, and a data source icon. And most people know that the home icon is going to take you back to the home page, the information icon is going to provide information, and the data source icon is going to provide you with information on the data source. So these are icons that are easy to recognize and communicate meaning without you having to tell your end user the meaning of it. So within the dashboard that I created, I've identified 4 icons and used them within this dashboard. So the person icon is used to identify a person. The box is used to identify how orders were shipped or placed, so the number of orders. The sales tag is used to identify the number of sales, and then the money bag is used to identify money, or in this instance, the profit that's left over. You want to also provide labels or context for each of your icons that you start to incorporate on your dashboard, especially if there is an action associated with it. So if you want your user to do something with this icon, you want to tell them to do that. If it's there just to be there, then you may or may not need to show it, but you definitely want to include a label and provide context to your user. So here, for the home button, you want to click it to return to the main page. Here, for the information icon, you want to hover on it for information about the dashboard. Here, for the data source icon, you want to hover on it for information on the data source. Here, within my example, the icons that I've used are associated with bands. So the band label is essentially the same thing as labeling the icon in this instance. So here we have a person, which is labeled as customers. Here we have a box, which is labeled as orders. The sales tag is labeled as sales, and the profit bag, the money bag, is labeled as profit. So in this instance, I don't need to relabel each of these icons. They're already labeled within the dashboard itself. So you also want to provide context for areas that require interaction, as I was mentioning earlier. So if you have a logo at top and you want them to click on the logo to go to like the conference homepage in this instance, you want to make sure that you're directly telling your audience to click on this logo to go to the homepage. Or you can have that within the hover over. So if you simply add in a click here icon, you can simply have them note to possibly hover over, click on this area. So that's what the click icon does. And when you hover over it, it says, now click to view information, click to view the conference homepage here. So it's either showing it as an explicit label or showing it using an icon. Next, you want to make sure that your icons are simple. You don't really need anything creative, right? On the left-hand side, I have a simple house. You don't need the house on the right-hand side. It's way too complex. It's way too creative. Simple is better when it comes to icons, especially when you're using smaller icons on the dashboard. You can't really see that. So here, I've used very simple icons, right? A box, a sales tag, a money bag, and a person. You did not see me use these types of icons. I didn't use, a guy with a bun. I didn't use a box with design. I didn't use a money chart with arrows, and I didn't use a person that's in front of a store with a money sign above it. So nothing too creative. Simple is okay. I just want to keep your styles consistent and cohesive, right? So look at the top layer. The top layer is consistent. They're all shaded. They're all shaded this dark purple. Your second line is you have 2 icons that are shaded, and then you have your database icon that has different kinds of shades associated with it. So it's not keeping the style consistent. And your last one, you have your home icon and your data source icon. They're both shaded, but then you have your information icon. It's just a silhouette. So when you're using icons in your dashboard, you want to make sure that those styles are consistent. And here's an example of that. What you do not want to do is, in this example, have the shaded person and then have silhouette icons for the box, the sales, and the money bag. Because if you look at this from an end user perspective, their eye is automatically drawn to that dark shaded person, and you don't want their eye to just be drawn to that one icon. You kind of want to make sure all your icons are on the same level for the most part. So don't draw your user just to one icon. Make sure they're consistent and cohesive across the entire dashboard. So here's another example of ways that I've used icons that were consistent and cohesive. So here, all of the icons that are used in the Myers-Briggs Foundation dashboard are all shaded before they were all shaded and then placed on the dashboard. Here in this TED Talks visualization, all of the icons that were used are 100% shaded. So you also want to make sure that you're using dashboard themes and color schemes when you're incorporating your icons. So the dashboard that we're using, that the colors for it are the dark purple, which is the Tableau conference color, and a gray. The colors on the dashboard do not have blue, red, or green, so I'm not going to use icons that have random blue, red, or green colors associated with them just because. So you don't want to just use random colors on your dashboard just to make it pretty. You want to make sure that it's staying with the theme and staying with the color scheme. So here's examples of what you do not want to do. So here, there was nowhere on the dashboard that I used this blue, this green blue. So I'm not going to incorporate icons that have that green blue associated with it. I want to make sure that I'm sticking with the theme. Last but not least, you want to reduce icon graphic details. So if you see the house, here's another example of, being really simple, because the smaller these icons are, the harder it is to see those details, right? So if I were to zoom out of this and it got smaller and smaller, you're not going to be able to see the tree in the front or the chimney on the top of the house. If you zoom out of your information icon, you're not going to be able to see all of this, especially if it's really small in your dashboard. So you can have some type of creativity to it. You just have to make sure it's large enough if you are, but if you're using small icons, then you just want to make sure that you reduce the icon graphic details for it. And here's an example of images or icons that have way too much graphic detail and how they're so small on the dashboard that it's a little hard to see exactly what's going on in those icons. So here are the icon and art guidelines. But do not limit your creativity. If you decide to use creative icons, be sure that they are large enough, as I mentioned earlier, in the viz for the end user to understand. So if you must, incorporate some type of creativity into your dashboard and you want to have those big icons there, just make sure that they're large enough. And here are examples of ways that I've incorporated icons that have a lot of graphic detail or are more creative. Here's ways that I incorporated them to the dashboard. So this astronaut is rather large in my dashboard in the top left-hand corner. This image here of a globe with the flowers and the other planets around it is rather large on my dashboard. You can start to see each one of those specks and pieces associated with this icon. If I had this any smaller, you wouldn't be able to see each of those details. So great places to get icons online for free. For the most part, they're free. On flaticon.com, you can sign up for free. You can adjust your icons. I changed the colors of these two icons on flaticon.com. They weren't these colors originally, so I used Flaticon to change them. The Now project, you can play on a monthly basis or yearly basis. It's $39 US dollars, I believe, for access to their entire gallery, and you can edit and you can edit all of their icons and size them as you wish. And then Icons 8 is another good one as well. These are the sites that I go to for all of the icons that I use. Next, we'll talk about choosing colors that matter. So first, you want to make sure that you're letting the brand colors form the basis of your visualization. So if you're working for an organization or if you have a client, 9 times out of 10, they have a brand associated with that business, and you want to use those brand colors within your visualization. So here are some examples. The Tableau conference, I knew I was presenting this at the Tableau conference, so I made sure that the dashboard I created had the color scheme from the Tableau conference itself. So the dominant colors here are the purple, and then the secondary color here is the light gray. So you want to make sure that you're using your brand colors for the dominant parts of you want to make sure that you are using your brand colors for the structure of your visualization. So you're using the purple here for the headers, for the dashboard title, for the majority of the information that's displayed on this chart, for the section headers. So make sure that you're thinking about and using brand colors with your visualizations. Here's a LinkedIn bid that I created to where I took the LinkedIn colors. The yellow is also one of their colors as well, and I incorporated that into this LinkedIn visualization. So here you see the blue, the gray, the white, the yellow. All of those are in some form in this visualization. Here's the Women's March visualization that I created a couple of years ago. Their logos up top. You see the navy blue, the peach or pink, and then you see the tan, and all of that was used to form the entire visualization. You want to make sure that you're getting inspiration from art and other visualizations. So there are times where I'm stuck and I don't know like how to create a viz or even get started on the design of a viz. So the first place that I turn is Google. And typically if I'm creating for a particular subject, I'll type that subject in and then type the word infographics after it. And what you'll see is that here I selected, I typed in healthcare infographic, and this is the visualization that I saw. And from there, this kind of sparked my creativity process, and I saw that, oh, okay, I like the red here, the white here, the green here. So I took that color scheme, and I tweaked it just a little bit and incorporated it into the visualization that you see on the right-hand side. So I took some of those design elements and placed them into my visualization. Here's another example for the earthquake infographic that I created, to where I was stuck on how I wanted to go about designing it. So I simply typed in earthquake infographic. And here's one of the visualizations that I saw on the web. And what I liked about this was the navy blue and the earth tones that are used here. And I like how there's a world map up above. And I like this break that you see here, because typically when you think of an earthquake, you think about it like breaking the earth. So I like this form of a break that was used here in this infographic. So I took this infographic and I took out the colors from it, and I created mine on the right-hand side that you see with very similar elements, and I used an area chart to do the break for my visualization. So even if you don't want to go to Google, you can go to Tableau Public, which is another great resource as well. So in creating the visualization that I had, I simply searched on Tableau Public Superstore Scorecard, and here's the visualization that I saw on Tableau Public. And I took some of the elements that I loved here and I placed it within this dashboard. So this dashboard was essentially inspired by John Duggar, who created the original viz that you see on the left-hand side. So I saw that, I tweaked it, I took out the elements that I liked, I placed it in my visualization. And whenever you do that, you want to make sure that you are saying that this person is inspiring you. So you want to make sure you should give them attribution within Tableau Public, especially if you're publishing very similar work out into the Tableau Public space. So next, for colors, you want to make sure you're limiting the number of dominant colors. Simply use the rule of 2. So in this example, the dominant color here is purple. My secondary colors are the light gray and the white. So you want to make sure you're limiting the number of those dominant colors. You didn't see me incorporate the pink and the purple within the visualization because that's just going to be way too many colors. Here, the dominant color in my visualization was this yellow. So the secondary colors are the gray, the white, and the black. So when I think of dominant colors, I think of colors that aren't your grays, your blues, your whites, your blacks, things like that. Those are things that I consider like secondary colors, like they're your basic colors that you're going to 9 times out of 10 use in a visualization to begin with. So any other color that's on the color scheme outside of those, I consider a dominant color. So here the dominant color is this bright yellow. You didn't see me incorporate like a bright red or a bright orange as well. I'm using one dominant color. Here I'm using 2 dominant colors. So as I mentioned before, your whites, even your browns, your blacks, and your navy blues, I consider those your secondary colors. And in this instance, the navy blue here is a dominant color along with the pink, because it takes up the majority of this viz. So as I mentioned earlier, things that you do not want to do. This visualization on the right is showing 4 different dominant colors: the orange, the pink, the blue, and then the dark blue. So with this, color is just way too much, especially when we're looking at sales for everything. So I'm coloring sales 4 different ways. It just doesn't make sense to do that. Next, you want to make sure you're creating accessible color schemes, and you want to test them. So here with this visualization on the left-hand side, I made sure that I tested the visualization to see how individuals with color vision deficiencies, how they would be able to interpret this viz. So individuals who are red weak, green weak, blue weak, or red blind, green blind, or blue blind, blue blind. This is exactly how they would see the visualization if it was presented to them. So to test your color palettes, I've also provided you with a link. So it's colorblindness.com, and there's a simulator to where you can upload an image of your visualization, and it will show you exactly what it will look like for a person with that type of color deficiency. Here's another example of a visualization that I created and how I tested it. In this instance, I didn't really necessarily need them to see The red per se, I just needed them to highlight or understand that when the red is highlighted here, that, you know, that's the max for that particular bar. And they can see that, you know, with any type of color deficiency that they may or may not have. They can see that intended purpose there. So make sure you understand how you're using color, the purpose of it, and that your end users can understand that purpose. So here's an example of that basic red-green color palette in Tableau that a lot of people love to use. Here's what it looks like for individuals who have, you know, color deficiencies. In this instance, I know that because I don't have any of the color deficiencies, that the California is horrible with profit and Texas is amazing. But if you have some form of color deficiency, you can't easily identify that. That California is bad and Texas is good because they're both dark. So, you know, your end user can't see and differentiate between the two colors. So you want to use color purposefully and for reinforcement. So what do I mean by that? In this example, the yellow shades and then the visualization are used to highlight the top 15 cities with the most sunshine hours, and then the gray is used to highlight the cities, the bottom 15 cities with the least sunshine hours. So yellow specifically relates to top, and the bottom, the gray specifically relates to the bottom, and the same thing with the hours per month line chart on the right-hand side. The darker the yellow, that means the more sunlight, and the darker the gray, that means the less sunlight that they get. So here I'm using color with purpose. I'm strategically deciding how to use the gray and the yellow. And this example is used for reinforcement. So everywhere that you see the blue bar, it's highlighting the top restricted dietary requirement on both the bar chart as well as within the text below it. So the bar here relates to the text here. So here I'm using color for reinforcement to reinforce the top restricted dietary requirement. And this example is used for both. So within the top area here, I've used color to reinforce or draw my user's eye to what I want them to pick up on within the description. And then down below, I'm using color strategically to differentiate between HBCU, which is a historically Black college or university, and non-HBCUs and how they perform for these particular items. So the shaded one is HBCU, the silhouette is a non-HBCU. So in this biz, I would say I'm using color both strategically and purposely and for reinforcement. And here's another example of how I'm using it purposefully here. So color in this essence is every single shade of color is related to a level of press freedom. So your green is for free, your yellow is partly free, and your purple is not free. And everywhere that I've used green, yellow, and purple, I've purposely made sure that I've related it back to the level of press freedom that the color is associated with. And last but not least, if you're stuck, design in grayscale first and add color to highlight information. So if we look at this visualization, here's an example of how I took that viz. And say, for instance, I didn't know how I wanted to color it. Here's an example of designing it in grayscale. And then I'll walk you through the first thing that you want to do is you want to choose colors for your title, your filter, and your band area. So in this instance, when you select those colors, you're either going to shade add color to your title area and add a border around your band area, or if I add a border around my band area, then I'll sometimes have a thin separator line between the filters and the header as well. So, you know, step one in starting with designing in grayscale and then adding color, step one would just be to look at your header sections and start to add color to those. Here, you next want to look at each of your charts individually and understand and recognize, do you want to highlight anything in those charts? So if I look at these charts individually, on the right-hand side, if we walk through the sales per region, I don't need to highlight anything there. The text table, I don't need to really highlight any information there. The segment per region highlight table, I want to highlight the intersections that have the highest, so that's why I've added color to the chart that you see on the right-hand side. Then if I go to the next thing, you look at this map, you know, those are a lot of dots on there, so we can change this from being a symbol map over to a field map to easily draw the users in. So I've added color now to the map. And then last but not least, if you look at your sales per category bar chart, do you need to add color to this? Not really, because it's already sorted from highest to lowest. So in this instance, I would simply just place, a light gray color on that bar chart so that, the user's eye isn't drawn to it with the dark black, but it's still there and sorted from highest to lowest. And then you want to just add some final touches to your worksheet titles, your dashboard footer, and you want to test the shading of the borders and the various color fonts. So in this example, I've shaded all of the borders here, and this is really bold. It kind of just draws your user away from the information itself because these titles are just so bold. So I always recommend never shading your title areas this bold and this dark. To whereas on the right-hand side you have borders, it's better, but it could be a little bit better. So it's not as bad as shading it with the dark purple, but here we have the smaller lines, the smaller border lines, and your user's eyes aren't automatically drawn to the section headers on the right-hand side. So here's an example of, changing that to a lighter shade of gray, or just in this instance, just bolding the title area and not even placing a border around it. So here are the color guidelines. So really quickly, let's get into uncomplicated fonts. The first thing you want to make sure is that you're sticking to one legible font. In this instance, this is a font. I'm using the one font there, but it's not legible at all, right? So you want to make sure that you're sticking to and you're only using one legible font within your dashboard. So in this example, I've used Tableau font on both the left-hand visualization as well as the right-hand visualization. So I've used Tableau font consistently throughout the dashboard. Here, I consistently use Times New Roman in my entire dashboard. Next, you want to make sure you're not using more than 4 sizes of that font type within your dashboard. So in this example, I typically break out the font sizes by dashboard title, worksheet title, chart header, and then anything related to the worksheet pane and additional text. And for the dashboard title, I sized it at a size 22. Worksheet title, I sized it at size 14. Chart headers, which are your customers, your orders, sales, and things like that, I sized that at a size 9. And then anything related to the worksheet pane itself, so the labels for the bars, I sized that as a size 9 as well. On the top up here shows you typically how I size each of those sections. Next, you want to avoid custom fonts if possible, right? So custom fonts that are like native to just a Mac or your computer in general do not translate well to other individuals' computers. So here's an example of an image of how this dashboard looks on a Mac PC, on a Mac computer. But then when I downloaded this and I placed this on Tableau Online, here is how, Tableau Online does not have this font associated with it. So it kind of just skewed the way my font looked in the dashboard, and it parsed out those numbers, to expand them left to right. And that wasn't the intent that I wanted with the font. So just make sure that you're avoiding custom fonts if possible. A way to avoid that is to look at the list of Tableau Online compatible fonts. So if you want to create a visualization, maybe start with one of these that are listed here, because it's going to translate well once you publish it over to Tableau. Next, you want to be strategic with fonts and background colors, and this one is really important when you're selecting fonts and background colors, because you have to remember that individuals with color vision deficiencies cannot see certain colors, certain font colors against certain background colors. So you want to be strategic and test them by making sure that they're accessible. So here is a website that allows you to test your font text, so the color of your text, the size of your text, the weight of your text. So you simply just want to type in the smallest font of that text, and you want to place this in the top line. And then the second line is where you can type in the background color, and then you want to make sure that it's ADA compliant, and the compliance here is based off of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is a set of guidelines that were developed to make sure that websites and other digital content placed on the web had the information past the guidelines, so that individuals with a range of disabilities, one of those being color contrast deficiency accessibility, those individuals could see the information that's online and available. So the second level of passing the Web content accessibility guidelines is the AA compliance, and it just basically tests the ratio of your contrast ratio of the text against the background color. And if it doesn't pass, it provides you with ways to now change either the background color or the text to make sure that it's compliant so that individuals with these deficiencies can see your work. So here's an example of this blue that I used here within the text. So this is a size 9 where I said the dietary restriction. I've highlighted that in the paragraph. I want to make sure that I'm taking that font color, that font size, typing it in here, and then I took that gray background that I had. Excuse me. I had that gray background that I had, and I made sure that it was compliant. Versus here, if I were to just slightly change the background color to a lighter background color, as you see, it fails, and the tool is providing me with other ways of now changing either the text or the background color to make sure that it's compliant. So especially when you're working with two colors on top of each other, like a colored font on a colored background, you just want to make sure that the contrast is good enough so that your end users can see them. Next, you want to use a color and a bold text to emphasize text. So in this example, I've used red and bold to emphasize the important information in the description up top. So my users' eyes are automatically drawn to things like the year, the number of participants, the overall stats for both the HBCU and the non-HBCU graduates. Versus on the left-hand side of this visualization, if I didn't, take the user a bit of time to parse through that entire paragraph and understand the things that I wanted to highlight. So simply just bold or highlight information so that your user's eyes are drawn to it, especially if it's a lot of text. In this example, I'm using font to emphasize the difference between leadership and text. So everywhere that I've used or I've referenced leadership, I've made sure I stuck to that blue, and everywhere I've referenced text, I made sure I stuck to that bright green. Here's an example of what it would look like if I didn't have it in the header. And then last but not least, you want to make sure that you are aligning left to right, stay away from center alignment. And if I had to further go into details on this particular guideline, I would always say your left alignment is your best alignment, not your right alignment and not your center. So what happens is your users are reading from left to right. However, if you must use the right alignment, you only want to do it just for design purposes. So in particular, I use right alignment and left alignment here within the timeline visualization. However, just please do understand that right alignment is just as bad as center alignment, but I've only used right alignment here just for design purposes. You typically always want to left align large blocks of information for your user. In this example, if I center aligned everything, it's a lot harder to see. Your user doesn't know where to begin for each line. They have to continuously look here, then here, then here, then here, then here, then here. So same thing with right alignment. They have to read to the end of it and then, focus on a different part, starting point at the beginning. So you always typically want to left align unless you're using right for design purposes. So those are the font guidelines. Those are my design secrets. So to summarize it, you want to start with your audience and their requirements, right? Then you want to build your template and add your views. Then you want to incorporate design elements that will enhance your story. And then last but not least, you want to add color strategically, icons for charm, and use the rule of 4 when selecting fonts. So anyone can be a designer. It's not something you're born with. It's not something exclusive to a select few. All it takes is practice while keeping a few design secrets in mind. And I'm Shantali Jagannath, and those are my design secrets. I'll open it up for any questions. And in terms of where you can download the document, as well as start to read the blog on where I further explain some of these points, the website for it is designsecretsforanondesigner.com. And here's my contact information as well. That's all I have today.
Thanks a lot, Chantley, for sharing all the design secrets with us. So I just got one question about, do you recommend any website for icons?
Yeah, so flaticon.com, thenownproject.com, and icons8.com.
Okay. And what you will suggest to the people who have just started their journey in Tableau? So any 2 or 3 tips you want to give them?
For individuals who have just started their journey, I would say, understand those requirements. Just really understand these secrets that I just gave to you all. So, build out your visualization, but start to think about how to use color strategically. Start to think about ways to incorporate small icons to make your visualization pop. Strategically think about font and how you're using it, and only add color really where it matters.
Perfect. We can take one last question if anyone has. You can just go ahead and comment it into the chat or Q&A tab. I think chatly we are good with the Q&A. I think no one has any question for you today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot, Gently. Have a great weekend ahead.
Alrighty.
Take care.
You
Bye-bye.
too. All right. Bye-bye.